Hi, it's me, Ingrid INFP. And I wanted to talk about the Tylenol studies because I do happen to be a doctor now, and I do happen to be autistic. And yeah, I'm not a researcher though. So I tried to read the studies, I tried to understand them. I did not understand a lot of stuff that was going on, but I tried, I did my best. And I happen to have some insider information because I found out that I'm part of the study unknowingly, and also that I have worked at the place where they created one of the studies, because I studied medical school at Karolinska Institute, and I actually did a study that was not published and that was just part of my master's degree in medicine in 2017. And I was at the MEB, which is the epidemiological center, and basically I was working with the same Swedish records, the National Registry. That's the people who made the Swedish study of 2.5 million children used. I specifically did a study about twins, so it was a subsection which was twins, and the twins, I wanted to find out if birth weight had any correlation to any association with increased risk of asthma. Now, I was sitting next to a girl who was doing the same, but with birth weight and ADHD. So it ends up that through, friend of a colleague of a colleague of a colleague, I kind of have an understanding of how Ahlqvist et al. Made their study in April 2024. I don't know the researchers. I have no, connection to them, but I happen to have worked at the same institution just a few years earlier. And I also saw now on SVT, which is the Swedish television, that Viktor Ahlqvist went on TV to say basically Trump and his colleagues misunderstood my study entirely. Obviously, he's going to say that because it's his study, but I kind of have to agree there. And the thing is, Trump did receive information that came from an American study. There was a meta-analysis of several different studies where in that study, it seems that there is an association between paracetamol and paracetamol in pregnancy and then autism. So Trump wasn't wrong in that, he was just repeating the information that he was told. The thing is, this meta-analysis, I was having a really hard time reading it. I didn't understand it. It's the thing of what studies are you going to believe? Which ones show the most credible evidence? And the thing is that meta-analyses are considered to be very strong studies because they amass a huge amount of information by using studies that are already done and compiling them together and seeing which ones showed the association, which ones didn't, and comparing and contrasting. The only thing is that there is a risk for bias in the way that the information is, what is prioritized. What study do they lend most credibility to might be their own kind of bias, They might say, well, this part of the construction of a study is the most important, and so therefore we're going to prioritize what is said in this study compared to this other one. So they're doing a kind of it's supposed to be very objective and stuff, but it is a little bit you're injecting a certain dose of subjective interpretation of studies, which is what I'm doing with this video. It's a subjective interpretation of studies. I'm not like claiming to be objective because I'm not studying this, you know. But I think that that's what happened. As a person who did not 100% understand everything, I've just done like 3 hours of research and I still like don't understand. But I will give credit where credit is due. It seems like they did a thorough looking at the literature, looking at what it was, and they found 46 studies. This is the Prada and Beccarelli meta-analysis. That is what Trump was basing. Trump, Arthur K. Jr., the American, associations of whatever health. They were looking at this meta-analysis of 46 studies that looked at Tylenol use and the presence of ADHD, ASD, or neurodevelopmental disabilities in the child. So there is this meta-analysis that is very strong because of having so many studies in it. Now, not all of the studies had specifically about ASD. I think that there were like 6 studies or something that looked specifically at autism. And the thing is that Ahlqvist et al., the Swedish study from Karolinska Institute, is in it. And the thing is that the meta-analysis is not very clear on like which study had a positive association and which one didn't. Maybe I didn't read the numbers right, but they just said like, oh, like more than half, like this amount of studies had a positive association, and this amount had no association, this amount had a negative association. But they don't say like which one specifically. They have a lot of graphs and like charts, but it's like I could not find that specific information. And what I realized is that they were very focused on the limitations of the Ahlqvist study instead of like focusing on the limitations of all the studies. They were kind of biased against the Swedish study, it seems, because they thought like the things that they prioritized very highly, the Swedish study had limitations in specifically that area that they prioritized highly, you know? So it was kind of unfortunate because this huge study with 2.5 million children was not enough to sway the balance of these smaller observational studies. Also, they seem to have misinterpreted a little bit and seem to have thought that Ahlqvist did not really work on the confounding factors and adjusting for confounding factors, when really that's the most important thing they did. So basically, the Ahlqvist studies showed no association, no evidence for an association between Tylenol use in pregnancy and autism in the child. At first, it showed probably a sporadic association, but that when adjusted for confounders, they found out that there was none. There was no association. And that's a very important thing to do, is to adjust for confounders. Then they did a sub-analysis of siblings, a sibling control group. Or not control group, but you could say that it was like a sibling. If the test subject, or how could you say, the individual has autism, then they looked at if there was a sibling that did not have autism, or the other way around, you know, and they concluded that when adjusting for the familial confounding, so the siblings and their state of health, they found that there was no association. So Tylenol did not cause autism, basically. Now, so there was a correlation, they thought at first. Like at first they saw like, oh, there's a higher, but then they realized, oh, well, there are so many things that could have led to the autism that were not because of the Tylenol. So, for example, the socioeconomic status of the mother, smoking in the mother, if the child was premature, if there was, there are plenty of other factors. And one such factor might be, for example, that the mother might be neurodivergent, and so maybe she might need, maybe she had a higher risk of having a child that was neurodivergent anyway. And who are the women who are eating Tylenol? Probably might be people who have comorbid difficulties from autism. If you have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is often comorbid with autism, you might have more pains, so you might need more Tylenol. Now, Tylenol is the only safe painkiller and help for fever that a pregnant person has to use. You can't use anti-inflammatories like ibuprofen, because that can lead to the blood vessels contracting and your baby not getting any blood and nothing, no oxygen. And you can't use opioids because it's going to give, the fetus is not going to develop correctly. And you're going to have different kinds of issues with the development. So paracetamol is what pregnant women have. And the thing is, if you have a fever when you're pregnant, then you're going to, maybe that in itself is going to lead to problems with your child. So all things considered, even if Tylenol or paracetamol were to give a slight increased risk of autism in your child, if you have a high fever, then it's safer to take the Tylenol. It's safer to have like a slight possibility than a much bigger possibility of a problem occurring in your child and possibly death of your child. We have to evaluate the risks. And even if there was a positive association for autism, I think that the risk here is like, would you rather have an autistic child or a dead child? Okay? There will be controversy about this, but I think that in most cases, most mothers would answer that they'd probably prefer having an autistic child. But that's not sure in this point in age. A lot of people would rather have no child, have a miscarriage, than have an autistic child. So I understand that there's a lot of, it's tough if you have a child with very high support needs, and I'm not saying that it's easy. And I understand why a lot of parents would not want an autistic child, because they're not ready for all of the care that it involves. But I think we need to start, blaming society for that, rather than blaming mothers for having to take a Tylenol because they have pain, And also, Trump is a man, so when he's saying you can just tough it out, yeah, he has never been pregnant, so I would leave the conversation to women who actually are or have been pregnant to choose about this. Anyway, that's me going into tangents. But if we're going back to the studies, I actually would be part of the study, but I would actually be a problem. I would actually be an outlier in this, because the thing is, in the Alquist study, he took children who were born between 1995 and 2019 that were born in Sweden, and that they have the information about both of the parents. And they looked at who got prescribed Tylenol. So, and then they looked. So I was born in 1995, so I was included in that. And I was born in Sweden at that time. And then they looked if these children had an autism diagnosis before the 31st of December 2021. Thing is, I got diagnosed in 2024, so I wasn't part of that study. The study came out before my autism diagnosis. So I would have been counted as a non-autistic child, I guess. And the sibling analysis, they couldn't do a sibling analysis on me either because my brother was born outside of Sweden. So we don't have any data on him. So that's just a funny side note that I happen to be one of the people in the study, and I didn't help in the study because I was not diagnosed until after the study was done. But anyway, it's kind of funny to think of. In Sweden, it's very easy to do studies about epidemiological stuff because we have the National Patient Registry where every person that is there, every diagnosis gets registered into the system. Now, because Sweden is very big on ethics, it's not like something that people think is a problem here. I understand that, we have patient secrecy, we have all sorts of different, and they have to go through an ethical commission and everything. In the US, I understand why these registries would be cause for concern, because, how would they use the information, that kind of thing. I did not consent to being part of the study, except that I did consent by being Swedish, being born in Sweden. By using the registers, you are kind of assuming that people are consenting to this. And that's a whole question in itself, but that's the reason that you can do these studies, because Sweden is one of the only countries that has such a registry, and also it's the biggest one to have such a registry, because like Denmark has such a registry, but Denmark is so small compared to the Swedish population. So that's why they could have so many cases, because it's national. It's all of the children who were born during that time period. And well, all of them where they knew the information about the parents too. So, if you didn't know who the dad was, they wouldn't include you in the study, that kind of thing. The problem with the study though is that the exposure, the knowing which mothers took the Tylenol and which didn't, comes from the National Registry as well. And it doesn't include over-the-counter medicines. So it's only those that got prescribed Tylenol, which was only 7% of the mothers, rather than there was a Japanese study where they actually asked the mothers, and they found out that it was like 50% of the mothers. So obviously there are many more mothers that were taking Tylenol during pregnancy than those 7%. It's just that these were the ones that were prescribed it. So obviously these mothers are more sick, because why would they get prescribed paracetamol in the first place by their midwife? But the thing is also like, how are you going to go back in time and ask every single one of these mothers if they took Tylenol? It would be a huge, 2.5 million people, you would have to ask them if they took a Tylenol during their pregnancy. That's not possible. It's not feasible to make such a study. Also, I think that what is good is how they got the autism diagnosis, is that they decided who had a diagnosis before 10 years of age, and that actually used the people who had the official diagnosis. Instead of doing, some of these studies would use a questionnaire for the parents to fill out about their child, which is, I'm not going to say anything really, because it's not an official autism diagnosis. So yeah, I think that the Swedish study was really strong, but it had those limitations. And the problem is that the meta-analysis that was Prada and Beccarelli from 14th of August 2025, the one that actually Trump is looking at, and the one that RFK Jr. and you know, all of the American groups are looking at, that was a meta-analysis of 46 studies. They saw the fact that the exposure was wrong, or not close enough to reality or whatever, that was a huge source of why Alquist et al.'s study is like has problems, you know, that it's not representative of how it should be, and kind of ignoring some of the big strengths of the study, which is that there are so many kids, and that it was systematic, and it didn't rely on patient questionnaires, or it was just the bare facts, you know. So many people got prescribed Tylenol, so many people got the autism diagnosis at this certain point of time, at this certain age, and it was clear and just clear cut, you know, and it adjusted for confounders and everything. But the Prada and Beccarelli American study kind of skewed the information according to how they wanted it, because that's what you can do in a meta-analysis. And that's the problem with meta-analysis, is that it's trying to interpret different information. And they try to explain bias and like turn bias into an objective meter in numbers. And it's probably like the way that studies are done. I don't know. I'm not like a scientist, but it seemed like they weren't like super clear about like which studies were saying that there was an association and which ones weren't. They just said this amount of studies said this, and that they somehow wanted to focus on those rather than the ones that said that there was no association. So it seemed like it was kind of people with an agenda. You know, I'm not going to go into conspiracy theories, but it's kind of interesting that RFK Jr. would say before the summer that, oh, we'll have a solution to, like, we'll have the cause of autism before September, and that this meta-analysis, he must have known that this meta-analysis was happening, and then he's saying, oh, well, we found the cause of autism, when really the studies that were included in the meta-analysis had already been done. He just had like commissioned this kind of thing to happen, and then we found it, without saying that a year ago this huge study was done in Sweden, and that Sweden had already gone off. They'd already said, once that study came out in 2024, April 2024, huge information came out to the Swedish population that paracetamol is safe to take during pregnancy and that it does not cause autism. And Victor Alquist has now come up on TV to explain that Trump and his colleagues have misunderstood the study, because it showed no association, despite maybe showing an association before accounting for confounders. So the Swedish population has been told that, like, okay, it's safe, there's no problem. Now, because it's America has influence over the rest of the world. Now that America is saying, oh, well, it's dangerous to take paracetamol, now the whole world is panicking, and it's like, no. Like, think about like what the meta-analysis might not be 100%, honest. There might be some kind of twisting of the results that they saw. And I'm not saying that they were deliberately lying or whatever. They're saying what the studies show. It's just that they're interpreting certain things conveniently for their purposes. So I think that I believe in Swedish research because I've been there, Like, I don't want to blindly follow the Swedish government, but, I kind of think that in this case, big cohort studies, big register studies are a good way to get information. And of course, it's not going to be perfect because, there are certain limitations in every study. But I think that you can't say from the evidence that is presented in these different studies that pregnant women shouldn't take paracetamol, and that it's paracetamol that is the one and only cause of autism. Because as we know, most diseases, most conditions, most things are multifactorial. There's very seldom that a disease is due to one certain thing, a lot of people think that diabetes is caused by sugar. That's not true. I mean, consumption of sugar might be a part in the obesity problem, which might lead to insulin resistance, which might lead to diabetes. But there are 10,000 other things that can lead to diabetes, such as the genetics, such as, overweight due to other factors, stress, physical activity, consumption of fat. There are so many other things, and there are very few conditions or diseases that are due to one specific factor. And so autism is multifactorial. There has been shown to be a genetic component. In my case, it's probably a genetic component, but we'll never know because my dad, who I think has autism, will probably never get tested for autism, but he exhibits a lot of the same traits as me, who is diagnosed, Also, my mom has probably ADHD on her side of the family, and maybe autism as well. I have a cousin who's autistic. I have a cousin's child who's autistic. I think that there is a genetic component here. I also suspect that my brother is neurodivergent in some way too. And so there are other things. It's not just the Tylenol. And even if Tylenol might have been a risk factor for developing autism, it might be a unnecessary one. Maybe the pregnant woman needed to take that Tylenol because that was the only thing that she could use, And we don't, I think that we need to focus our studies on things that actually can help. And the thing is, we don't even know how Tylenol works in the body. We don't know how it stops pain. Maybe we should focus our studies on how it works for its working mechanism. What is it? Instead of going through these hypotheticals of causing autism as if autism is the worst thing in the world, I think that we need to focus on the right things and focus on how do things work, rather than just finding associations between random things and then scaring everybody with it, because that's putting a lot of blame on the mothers. I don't know if my mother took Tylenol when she was pregnant with me, but I assume not, because I was healthy in all other senses of the word, and her pregnancy went well, and I was born premature 1 month, but I was completely healthy, and I don't think that even if my mom would have taken a Tylenol, that it would have made any difference. Now, some of the studies say that like, oh, it's only when there's prolonged paracetamol use that there has been shown to be a correlation. Possibly. But what are you going to do? You know? How are you going to help pregnant women that are in pain? You know, how are you going to, help mothers to autistic children? Are you just going to tell them to stop taking Tylenol? And are you going to tell them, oh, you're not allowed to abort your children, but we're going to make, your life is going to be a hell with an autistic child because they'll not even be a person, that kind of thing. Like, the world is a dystopia. Like, it's terrible. I think that, we need to have our head on the shoulders when we're talking about research. Researchers are rarely certain about anything, and that's why they are so good at what they do. You need a lot of evidence in order to claim something right out. And I think that the research that has come out as of yet is not conclusive enough to say that there is an association, and rather there has been studies that have showed no association. And so the fact that they have found a cause is not true. It's not something that we need to go out and scare millions of women, and especially pregnant women, into believing. We have to be cautious, and who's the opposite of cautious is Donald Trump. So I'm glad I got to read through these studies and think about remember how it is to do journal club and all of this, and it was interesting for me. But I wish I didn't have to look at studies looking about the causes of autism. Like, I wish I could look at things that actually help autistic people and that help people in general, like pregnant mothers, that helps the population at large, and not like just studies that are there to like spread fear and give more power to the people in charge and all that. So yeah, tell me what you guys think. I mean, I'm not certain about anything that I'm saying either. This is my own interpretation about how I interpret their interpretation. I tried to look at the research and I tried to make sense of it all. But I am no expert in the field of autism research. I just am somebody who has been trained to read studies, and I am personally concerned because I am an autistic adult. But yeah, I might be wrong. It might not be the way that I thought. So maybe there are things that I missed. So tell me what you guys think. I will not accept people in the comments like talking eugenics about like how it's better to be dead than to be autistic. I don't want that, okay? But otherwise I think that it's free game. Come at me. Okay, have a good day. Bye.